It's my honor to serve as Rotarian of the Day today. This week's program, A Conversation with T. Boone Pickens. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Thomas Boone Pickens, Jr. Mr. Pickens was born in Holdenville, Oklahoma, and is a graduate of Oklahoma State University. These are the two most impressive things on his resume, and while further introduction is not needed, I'm just going to continue with just a few more items. Following his graduation with a geology degree, Mr. Pickens worked for Phillips 66 and later founded what would become Mesa Petroleum. Mesa quickly became one of the largest independent oil companies in the world. Pickens founded BP Capital Management, which invests many of its assets in the energy sector. Mr. Pickens is a philanthropist like few others. He is one of several who have signed the Giving Pledge, a campaign among the wealthiest people in America whereby each pledged to give his/her assets to charity. I believe about 70 billionaires or so have committed hundreds of billions of dollars to charities. Mr. Pickens' charitable endeavors have assisted countless individuals through human service organizations, hospitals, and universities. His alma mater is the biggest beneficiary to date, and I just think of what a loss it was for you not to have gone to Baylor. In 2008, Mr. Pickens announced the Pickens Plan, which promotes a reduction in the United States' dependency on foreign energy. We'll discuss more of this in a few minutes. Mr. Pickens is married to Madeline Pickens, who could not be with us today. Mr. Pickens has 5 children, 12 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild with another on the way, one of whom is with us today. Please help me welcome native Oklahoman T. Boone Pickens. So this is in the let's go ahead and get this out of the way category. How about those Oklahoma State Cowboys?
How about the Cowboys? Go Pokes.
So in 2005, OSU had a 4-7 season. Baylor even beat Oklahoma State. You then improved to.
Listen, Baylor.
I'm a Baylor grad. I have to work it in.
I know, but
every
listen,
week.
Grant Teff was a good friend of mine, and no, I listen to Baylor Bears, and Ken Starr, and I go to the OSU Baylor games together, and who's president of Baylor, of course, you know that.
He's a fine man.
Derek Stone, chairman of the Board of Regents, used to work for me. Well, I'm connected.
That's good. See, I like this. But every second, I'm getting more endeared to Boone Pickens.
Sure.
For sure. Okay, so then you improved to 7-6, a couple of seasons at 7-6, and then 9-4, then 2-11 and 2, and then 12-1. If you had stock in OSU, you'd probably be a pretty wealthy guy by now.
You'd feel
with
good
with this kind of growth. So,
I've got plenty of stock in OSU.
So tell us how you and Coach Gundy and the staff have turned this program around.
I didn't hear the question.
Tell us how you and Coach Gundy and all the other staff have turned this program around over the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, when I made the big gift, the first $165 million, that Mike Holder and I hunt quail together a lot, and he Holder and I go way back. I mean, back to the 70s, and he was at the ranch, and he brought a spreadsheet and rolled it out, and he said, "This is what I want you to consider," and it was a $300 million to Oklahoma State. And I looked at it and I said, "Roll it up." And he said, "No, I'm serious." He said, "I'm not talking about tonight. I just want you to start to think about this." And I said, "Okay, what are we going to get for our money?" And he proceeded, stadium and everything. And he had it, Holder's a smart guy, but he's a good salesman too, because he wasn't pressuring me to do anything. He just wanted me to think about some things. So as it unfolded, that we made the big gift for the stadium, and then we added to it. I'm over 500 now at Stillwater. And so about 60% of it to athletics and 40% to academics. But it was, my position early on was you've got to have something different than the other schools have. And they said, well, like what? And I said, well, I don't believe an athlete that's at OSU goes home to Tulsa or Oklahoma City or Holdenville or Dallas or Houston. Notice how I threw that in there. And anyway, that they go home and talk about the size of the stadium. When they go back to home and they're with, kids that went to OU or Texas, what is it they talk about? And I said, I think number one is food. They'll talk about how good their food is. And so we got the best training table in the Big 12. And two, I said, they'll talk about their bed, where they sleep. They said, you think so? I said, I think there are a lot of kids that go to school that have never slept where their feet didn't hang over. And we talked about that, and they all have their own beds at Stillwater, and they all sleep with their feet on the bed. Those are pretty long beds, but where did the beds come from? Holder, he beats the bushes quietly, and I said he doesn't put pressure on people. But Charlie Idle, Simmons Mattress Company, is OSU grad in Atlanta, and Charlie supplies beds. So, you start to look at the assets that we had, and a lot of them were certainly sleeping assets at Oklahoma State. Why? It's because we didn't win very much. And so you didn't have a lot to, cheer about. We had a good school, no question, but we didn't have a consistent football record. Consistent losers is about what it was. But I left that stadium so many times looking down at my feet because I felt so bad. And I told Holder, I said, well, you ring a bell with me on wanting to do something about being competitive. And so we had many sessions on the subject. It wasn't just kind of all at once, here it is, and go do it, and let's see what happens. So there was a great amount of planning. I didn't like the fact that we had the coaches came and went pretty fast. It was just almost a revolving door. And you go back and look at the coaches that have coached there. Jimmy Johnson did, you remember that, and Jim Stanley, of course, but I'm trying to think of somebody, a well-known person, but I'm drawing a blank. But who?
Pat Jones.
Yeah, Pat Jones. Yeah, Pat came. He stayed a long time with us. Pat I think he probably won more football games than anybody. But Les Miles came and went. Yeah, he was a hit and run. But anyway, I said, let's get somebody, one of us, that we know wants to be here. And we did that with Gundy. I said, you got to quit having those assistant coaches turning over on you, because those are your recruiters. So if you've got an assistant coach that's doing some good recruiting at Jinx or someplace that has Union, has good football players, they get to know him, he knows them, and he's when he shows up, they're glad to see him. They know who he is. But if you're turning over those assistants all the time, they've got to bring in a new guy to go meet these people and try to become friends with them and recruit players from their school. So I said, you got to have people that go back. So that means you can't turn over your assistant coaches. And if you look today, we have the third highest paid assistant coaches in college football. And we don't turn over those coaches. University of Texas tried to hire one of our coaches last year, and he didn't go down to Austin for an interview. And he said, I'm making as much as you're going to pay me, and I like living in Stillwater. And so that's what builds you a program. And Mike Gundy's done a good job putting all of that coaching staff together. We lost Joe DeForest. He left us this year after the season closed. But Joe was good, but Joe had been there for a long time. But he's the first coach we've lost out of there, in the last 3 or 4 years.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so turning to energy, the Pickens plan. Can you provide the audience with the Reader's Digest version of your plan and then update us on its status, implementation, and other aspects?
You're talking about one of those anecdotes between stories?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I'll do it in 3 minutes. I've been in the business forever. Geologist, OSU, 51. Worked for Phillips and then formed my own company, and you mentioned that. But anyway, my whole life has been the oil and gas industry. And I started to see with Richard Nixon's first place I noticed it, that he talked about our country being energy independent. And if we would elect him president, he would accomplish that. Never mentioned it again after he was elected. But he was just exactly like every one of them after him, Republican or Democrat, didn't make any difference. They all promised, elect me, and we'll be energy independent. Well, I blame the media for allowing that to go without somebody saying, you remember when you were running for president, asking for my votes, you were going to make us energy independent. You still don't have a plan. And 4 years or 3.5 years has gone by. That's exactly where we are with the present president. All of them, every one of them have told you energy, they call it energy security sometimes, energy independence. And this president told us in July of 2008 that in 10 years we will not import any oil from the Mideast. He's never mentioned it again. But he did come up last week and say use natural gas. You saw that. That's the first time he said that. Well, my plan was to get a plan for America. It was not to be energy independent, but it was to get started on a plan that would make us energy secure. You don't want to be energy independent. You want the oil from Canada, for instance, or from Mexico. We import from both those countries. That oil is secure. Our business is necessary to their economy, and it makes sense for us to be partners on energy. I don't like the 5 million barrels a day we get from OPEC because we pay for both sides of the war. I've gone past 3 minutes already, I know. But anyway, I wanted a plan, and so in July of 2008, I announced a plan, the Pickens plan, and I made it so simple. And people tell me this. They say, anybody can understand your plan. All I've asked for is the 8.5 million 18-wheelers. Now, a battery won't move an 18-wheeler. The only thing that's going to move an 18-wheeler is either going to be diesel or natural gas. And I consider diesel to be imported. It's not always the case, but it'll suffice when I'm selling this story, that all diesel is bad. And we want to replace it with natural gas, and we are absolutely up to our ears in natural gas. You know that. Natural gas today is $2.50. In the Mideast, it's $16. In Europe, it's $13. So we have abundant, cheap, domestic natural gas, cleaner natural gas, and any place else in the world. Our oil is $100 a barrel a day, and the global price is $115. So we're 15% cheaper on oil than the rest of the world. So we have the cheapest energy in America of any place in the world. What an opportunity for us. Up to now, we've had one missing link, is leadership. I know you'll say that's always the missing link. But the leadership in Washington, John Sullivan from Tulsa, congressman here, he understands it. He introduced H.R. 1380, and John knows what he's talking about when he's talking about energy. The guy, he gets it. But there are very few in Washington that understand energy. But that's where we are. That was the plan. That's what we try to do. I went out and spent a lot of money, and you saw me on TV and advertised and everything else. But when the day was done, and we now have a bill in the House and one being developed in the Senate, hopefully those will be put together and passed in some form or another. And I think it'll happen this year, but that's exactly what I said last year and the year before, that they would pass in 2011, 2010, and I didn't get anything. But now the president does talk about it, and that's good. I hope I got 1,700,000 people signed. How many in here have signed up on the Pickens plan? Pretty good, pretty good. The second largest group that I have in the United States, the first is Texas. The second is North Carolina. I think Oklahoma's fourth, but Oklahoma's not as large as, of course, Texas and North Carolina are. But Oklahoma people did join me, and I'd appreciate it if it doesn't cost you a dime. Just PickensPlan.com.
So other than people signing up or contacting their legislators to continue to put some pressure on them to serve as leaders to either promote House Bill 1380 or the Pickens plan or some energy policy, what can I do personally, or what can anybody in this audience do to decrease our reliance or decrease the demand that we're causing for foreign energy sources? I mean, from CFL bulbs to natural gas for our cars.
Well, what I wanted the president to do is tell American people, forget Democrat, forget Republican. It's us Americans together. The next car you buy, look at using a domestic fuel. That would be huge. And so if it doesn't do anything other than cause somebody, well, I'll go look at it, I'm not sure I'm going to do it, it will educate our people to the fuels that are available to you, which ones are domestic and which ones are foreign. But $1 billion a day goes out for the purchase of oil, foreign oil. That money goes and you don't ever see it again. It's gone. And if you can use your own resources in America, if we did the 8.5 million 18-wheelers, and that's House Bill 1380, if we did the 8.5 million, that is 2.5 million barrels a day. With only 8.5 million 18-wheelers, see, there are 250 million vehicles in America. So I'm talking about just a small fraction. If I had that, I can cut OPEC in half.
Fracking. So for those of you from the larger conference group, we've had some earthquakes in Oklahoma that are very unusual. So everybody is blaming that on fracking. So can you clarify for us, does fracking cause earthquakes? And more importantly, that's kind of facetious, does it cause water contamination to the levels that we've been hearing about from various sources?
Well, various sources that you're hearing about is probably from Pennsylvania. And this, do I believe in global warming? Not totally, but I'm not completely sure that global warming isn't a factor. But that group has raised a lot of money and created a lot of noise and stopped some things from happening, maybe some good, some bad. But they are having a difficult time raising money because global warming hasn't advanced as fast as they hoped it would. So consequently, the subject's kind of died down and doesn't get as much attention. That same group is raising money to stop fracking. It's a great opportunity now. They have another issue they can raise money for. But fracking, if you want to go where most information's available, the largest aquifer in North America extends from Midland, Texas to the South Dakota border across 8 states. That is the biggest aquifer. It's the Ogallala. That aquifer has had over 800,000 wells fracked lower than the aquifer, of course. The aquifer occurs above 1,000 feet. And then you drill through that, set casing, circulate back the surface, and you've taken care of any problem. Then you drill the well to whatever depth you want, 10, 15, 20,000 feet, frack the well or do whatever you want. You don't get back into the aquifer. So 800,000 wells have been drilled, and I tell them up in Pennsylvania. I made a speech at Williamsport, Pennsylvania 2 months ago, and I said, if you want real history on fracking, go down to Oklahoma and Texas and look at the records, Corporation Commission, Oklahoma Railroad Commission in Texas. They've got all the information you could imagine, and you can see whether fracking has been a problem or it hadn't been a problem. No, this in Pennsylvania is the only place we're interested. I see. They won't go to Oklahoma to check. They know what they think up there, and some of them think that they're damaged. Could you damage the aquifer? You could, theoretically you could, and maybe 1 out of 100,000 wells you might get something into the aquifer. You can clean it up, and they talk about what you're putting down the hole is secret. It's not secret. Chesapeake puts it on their website, and the guy at Halliburton, Jim Warner, I was with him up in North Dakota in September. He actually made a speech in Denver and drank some of the fluid that they fracked with. He's very sick now.
That's great. Okay, next question. I just Pepto-Bismol or something might help him. So I just read that 44 senators are trying to push through a bill that would bypass the president on this Keystone pipeline. How important is the Keystone, and how likely is it that they'll be able to push through this legislation so that we can get the pipeline built through Oklahoma and the other?
You're going to get the
central states?
pipeline built. You've got to do it because the national security of the country swings on it, because that's the oil that comes from Fort McMurray, which are the oil sands. I do not say tar sands, because the oil is cleaned up. They put it through a reformer up there, and the oil is would be shipped to the United States across the country and to the Texas Gulf Coast. But the oil sands reserves are 250 billion barrels, and that's what the Saudis claim they have. I don't think the Saudis have 250 billion barrels. But you're talking about a huge deposit of oil in northern Alberta, and that is going to be connected to us. And if it doesn't, if we don't take the Keystone Pipeline, that pipeline's going to go straight west out of Fort McMurray to Kennebunk, British Columbia, and it will be shipped to China. And we are real saps if we let that happen. Now, Stephen Harper, I used to live in Canada in the 60s, but Stephen Harper is from Calgary. I lived in Calgary. I know Stephen Harper. They're the premier of Canada. And he's a very straightforward guy, a little different than some of our politicians. I mean, when he says something, you better listen, because he will do what he says he's going to do. Unusual again for us. But Harper said, if the United States is not going to decide to do this soon, that we're going to go ahead and build a pipeline west and go to China. So he's put you on notice, and I think the Keystone Pipeline will be acted on before the election instead of after the election.
Okay, last question relating to energy. With respect to wind energy, how's that going? Are you in a place where you thought you would be 5 years ago, and what's the future of wind energy for our country?
No, I'm not in a place where, on a lot of things, I'm not in a place where I thought I would be. I wish I would be good at predicting things, not the event, but the timing. Right. When you go back and look, I've been pretty good on direction, but timing is what's cost me a lot of money. And
I'm glad you're not the only one.
Wind cost me a lot of money. That when I made the the big commitment to General Electric to buy $1 billion worth of turbines, that I had, the price of natural gas was $9. And I should have, if I had it to do over again, I would have hedged the $9 gas and for 10 years, and I would have been the smartest guy in town. But I thought natural gas would go higher, and it went lower. And at $6 natural gas, you price wind off the margin, and the marginal power generation is natural gas. So when natural gas is below $6, you can't finance a wind deal. It's hopeless. And now you're looking at 2.5, and I've got all those turbines, and I'm not kidding you, they're really crowded in my garage.
Your wife's ready to have those moved out?
My wife wants her parking place back.
Okay, so changing gears, what's the best investment you've ever made, whether it be financial, personal, corporate?
The best investment I ever made. Are we talking about, be specific, if it's a, let's don't confuse it. The best investment I ever made is when Mesa acquired Hugoton Production Company. And Hugoton Production Company, how we were ever successful, God only knows, because they were 20 times our size. And we actually acquired them. It was in 1969, but it made the Mesa Company. It gave us a foundation then that we could really grow, and but that was the best deal I ever made. And it really came down to, I got to know the CEO of the company, and he believed that I could do something if I had control of the assets. They got plenty for the equity in the company was, it was vastly weighted in their favor, in Hugoton's favor. And so he was, the Hugoton shareholders were very happy when we put them together, and then the company really made a lot of money.
Okay. Who has been the most significant influence in your life, and why?
Oh, I'd have to say, my parents have been for different reasons, but my grandmother, see, we lived at Holdenville, and my mother, father, I'm an only child, and my dad, actually in 1928, if you can believe it, there were two doctors that owned the hospital in Holdenville, and one was a surgeon, one was a GP. They had moved there from Duncan and bought the hospital. The surgeon only lived there 3 years. Okay, that's critical for me. So I showed up in 28, and he told my dad, he said, Tom said, you may have to make the biggest decision you'll ever make, that who survives, because said, Grace cannot deliver this baby. And they talked, and then they prayed, and my dad actually, he told him, he said, you're not but that far from the baby. And he said, Tom, you're asking me to do something I've never seen. I have a page and a half and 2 pictures. And he took my dad to the table. My dad thought it was a Bible on the table, but it was a medical book, and it was open to cesarean. And my dad read the page and a half and looked at it, and he said, you can do it. And he talked him in to delivering me cesarean at Holdenville, 1928. They didn't have another cesarean, I don't think, for 40 years in that hospital. And that guy was only in town 3 years. So, I wrote that book, The Luckiest Guy in the World. I wasn't kidding. But I had a dad that actually, and the doctor said, he said, Tom talked me into doing it. But they said you can't have any more children. So they never had another child, so I'm an only child because of that cesarean in Holdenville in 1928. I think it's a neat story. Of course, it's a true story, but what a way to come into the world, something like that. But anyway, influence on me, of course, my parents, I said, and my grandmother did. She lived next door, and she and my aunt lived together. They were widows, and my aunt was raising a boy. my cousin, who was 5 years older than I was, much smarter than I was, went to Phillips at Enid. Everything he did was on scholarship. Enid, Phillips, OU, Masters, Michigan State, PhD. And he, great guy, died a few years ago. But the two of us grew up there together with the influence of three women and my father. And it's a pretty good unit. He did pretty good, and I did pretty good. So we had good influence. So I'd say that if you want to say, okay, somebody outside your family, it would be my high school basketball coach in Amarillo, T.G. Hull.
Okay. And where'd you go to high school in Amarillo?
Pardon me?
Where'd you go to high school in Amarillo?
Where?
Where? Was it Amarillo High?
Well, of course, that's the only high school.
Well, that's good. That's what I was trying to get from you. There are some other people from Amarillo around here. I spent.
There are other high schools now, but it was the only one when I was there. My oldest daughter, Blythe's aunt, Deborah, she said that she came back. We lived in Canada, and she came back and graduated from Tascosa High School, and she said, Daddy never thought I went to high school in Amarillo because I went to Tascosa High School. That's right. There's only one Amarillo High.
Well, I used to ride my bike around Amarillo High School in fourth grade, so I have
did?
a little bit of Amarillo blood in me. Yes, sir.
Fourth grade, but you're talking about there in South Amarillo.
It's the one off of Bell Street. It's not the one maybe that you attended.
I was one downtown.
Okay, the real one.
The real Amarillo
That's
High
right.
School.
Okay, a couple more questions because I know some
See, I'm
Rotarians.
very loyal to these institutions.
That's good, as you should be.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you know about Rotary, and do you encourage your corporate employees to get involved in Rotary or other civic organizations?
We're not, I don't have anybody in my organization that's in Rotary, Kiwanis, any civic. I'm trying to think. No, we do a lot of work, charity work, but I have spoken at many Rotary functions, and I'm a Paul Harris. Yeah. So.
Very good. Congratulations.
I can't remember whether it's Paul Harris Scholar, Paul Harris what?
Fellowship.
Fellowship, yeah. But I have, anyway, I made that point. But I did when I thought I was going to run for governor of Texas, and I think it was 90. It was going to be announced at the Rotary Club in Dallas, and so I honestly did not know until the morning of the luncheon at the Rotary Club. You know, it's down there at Union Station, and great place, and I've spoken there several times. But anyway, I didn't make up my mind till the morning before the lunch whether I was going to run or not. And I had two speeches, and I looked at them till late at night and next morning and talked to my wife at length. And when I walked out of the room, I tossed the speech that I was going to run in the wastebasket. They went back and fished it out, and it's in my archives, but I didn't run. Thank God I didn't run.
Well, I have a little bit of power on the board right now. Maybe we can make you an honorary member of a club in Tulsa, the largest club in Oklahoma.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course, I have to go through a very bureaucratic process, but we'll see what we can do on that for sure. Okay, so
I do wear well in Oklahoma. I mean, you don't have to clear many things as who I am or what I'm about or anything like that. People in Oklahoma know me.
That's right, and we're proud of you too. Okay, so last real question. This deals with charity and taxes, if you will. So we've heard from the president that everybody should pay their fair share, and I've heard you quoted as to what the amount of taxes you've paid. Have you paid your fair share? And then how does your charitable activity fit into that fair share equation for you and other people of your wealth?
Do you want to know what I've given philanthropically and what I've paid in taxes?
Well, and just generally around the fair share topic and how your charitable giving fits into what, and I don't know if I know what fair share means, I'll be honest with you, but does charitable giving fit into what somebody's fair share should mean?
Well, on Piers Morgan, CNN, I did a filmed 3-segment deal for his deal, and the part about fair share was lifted. None of the rest of it was edited. They just took my comments about fair share out of it totally. I then was on Morning Joe, and there he asked me, and I commented about fair share. I said the same thing, Piers Morgan, as I said on Morning Joe, but I said I'm a little bit confused because I said the president keeps saying people are wealthy should pay their fair share. And I say, tell me what my fair share is. And of course, I'm not talking to him, but he never tells you what fair share is. It's almost like, well, whatever you feel good about, write the check out. Well, that's not the way you pay taxes. I mean, all of us know you abide by the rules. IRS tells us we try to figure out every way we can to save as much money as we can. But my tax guy, after we got on the subject, he said, you, over your life, you'll pay probably 30% of your income will go to taxes. And that's taking long-term capital gains, everything else. And he said 30%. And then when you die, that half your estate goes to taxes. And which seems pretty good bite, the whole thing. And I said on Morning Joe, I said, after I was 70 years old, and I'm 83, after I was 70, I've paid $665 billion in taxes. And I employ 150 people. And I said, I wonder what the president means when I'm not paying my fair share. And so that was on there, and that created some conversation. But on the philanthropic, my goal, well, Bill Gates called me and he said that Warren Buffett and I want you to join in on the, I can't remember what they call that, I always forget.
The giving pledge?
Yeah, it's a giving pledge. Yeah, okay, giving pledge. He said, we would like for you to join with us and leave half of your estate to charity. And I said, well, why don't you and Warren join with me? In Fortune magazine, 1984, I said I was leaving 90% of my estate to charity. He said, no, we already have a plan. We're not interested. So I said, okay, put me down for the giving pledge. But I have now, my goal 20 years ago was to give, while I was alive, $1 billion to charity, and I've done that. So.
Last question. This might be your hardest.
Oklahoma got a lot of that, you know. I want to say this, and old Clay Bennett complimented me for this 6 months ago. He said, you have done more to bring Oklahoma together, the universities together and all, by comments that you've made and been quoted. You know what I'm going to say?
No.
Okay, when I say that, listen, when we're not playing the Sooners, I'm for the Sooners. And I told them in Stillwater, I said, I don't want to hear anybody here ever say again they hate the Sooners, because we don't hate anybody in Oklahoma. I said, we want to beat them, of course, and maybe you feel bad the next day if you lose, but that's all you get. I mean, then we're back all Oklahomans again. And somebody said, you can't tell me that you pull for OU against Texas. I said, yes, I can. But I've lived in Texas over 40 years, but I was born in Oklahoma, and I still remember my grandmother saying more than one time, don't you ever forget where you came from. And I've never forgotten where I came from.
That's outstanding advice that you received from your grandmother, for sure. I wish that we could extend that to any Big 12 team. All of us root for each other. Last question. So, Oklahoma State plays Louisiana State. What would the score have been in the national championship?
I really don't think OSU is as good as Alabama, so I think we'd probably beaten them 14-0.
Mr. Pickens, thank you very much for your time, for just being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.